Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great day and welcome to Spar Brawl. My name is Kam Compani and I'm one half of your hosting duo. And as always, I'm joined by my friend and intellectual sparring partner, Sam Danishvar. Sam, how's it going this week?
Hi, well, it's going pretty great. I'm excited to talk about some new developments in the stories that we already covered, like the UAE Israeli peace deal and UK making changes to uh, laws governing its withdrawal from the EU. So it's been quite a good week. Not quite as perhaps news filled as the other weeks, but quite a good week.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll still be able to put on a great show. I got two stories that I'm really excited to kind of talk about. I mean, one really that I found super astonishing, which is the fact that Saudi Arabia and UAE and Kuwait have given a total of $0 to the UN's humanitarian appeal for Yemen. So we're going to talk about what that means. Does that mean there's a change in their strategy and their objectives in Yemen? And then I'm going to talk again about my follow up on my gender reveal rant story from last week. There was this gender reveal party in Dubai involving the world's tallest tower, and thankfully it received some backlash. So I'm looking forward to talking about that as well. But without further ado, let's jump into our main and biggest story for this week, which is the normalization of relations between Israel and not only UAE, but also Bahrain. So they officially signed their Abraham Accord. I think that's the name of the deal just between the UAE and Israel, but Bahrain also were also involved during this event at the White House on Wednesday. So I wanted to talk about a few things. First, I wanted to ask you, Sam, who do you think is the biggest winner out of this deal? I personally think the biggest winner is definitely Israel. And then I want to get into who second and third. But I think for Israel, this is a no-brainer. This is also really good internally, I think, for them, because they can go to their public and say, hey, listen, all this talk about us being at war with Arabs and everything, it's absolutely not true. We have these great relations now with UAE, Bahrain, and even Saudi Arabia. And the problem, as we've always been saying, are the Palestinians and blah, blah. So, Sam, first, who do you think is the biggest winner here? And then what else would you like to add to this story?
Sure. I agree that probably one of the biggest winners is definitely Israeli government, especially Netanyahu, who has managed to. Uh, I mean, if you, I don't know if you saw his speech at the White House as well, which he emphasized that how a strength can bring you victory as well as allies as well as friends, which I think was referencing his largely his his uh, very strict foreign policy towards Palestine, towards Gaza, towards Iran, towards the whole region. So I think he's one of the biggest winners because his foreign policy is somewhat vindicated, like officially vindicated. Although I would point out that I mean, this is my general take on the deal. I do think it's overblown, uh, uh, somewhat. Um, it's a bit of a propaganda uh, coup, so to speak, because I mean, we all know that not only these countries, but countries like Oman and even Qatar has had relations with Israel. They've been cooperating on security matters, on many issues, maybe not economically. So this is just basically a officialization of a already existing relationship. So in a way, I guess because of its timing, you could argue the biggest beneficiary is probably Trump and Trump's campaign. I mean, it is. I think it's designed timing wise. It's probably designed by Jared Kushner, who has a strong personal relationships with Mohammed bin Zayed, as well as Mohammed bin Salman, as well as Netanyahu. I believe he has a very strong family relations with Netanyahu. Their families were together since he was a child. So I think it was designed to benefit Trump's re-election campaign. But I think the biggest winner, as you said, is probably Israel. Potentially the Arab governments like UAE government and Bahraini government, depending on the level of backlash we see. So that's yet to be determined. I'm not, to be honest, I definitely feel bad for the Palestinian people, but I'm not quite sure we'll see a massive backlash in the Arab world. I don't think pan-Arabism is as strong as it used to be. So they could very well benefit from this. We'll get to the nitty-gritty of it later as well, but uh, unless there's a massive public backlash, they may benefit from it hugely. So we'll see.
Yeah, 100% agree that the word normalization doesn't even make any sense here. It's officialization for sure. Although is this, I don't know if this is a word or not, but anyway, that's what happened. Made the they've made their relationship official. And I also think that
this is equivalent of basically somebody, you know, going from in a relationship on Facebook to in a relationship with that person being tagged. So now,
yeah, exactly as well. So they've made it public, you can say. But one thing I kind of maybe I disagree a tiny bit is that I wonder how much Trump benefits from this. I mean, it's better than nothing. But in the eyes of the American public, given the main issues going on right now, which one is that some people think he's beyond crazy, so it's just about getting this guy out. Then there's the coronavirus. Then there's the economic recession due to the pandemic. So I really wonder how much in a week or two general voting Americans would care about this. So they're not too sure. So I think the second and third biggest winner are definitely the governments, but I also wonder how much the Gulf governments, but I also wonder how, I don't think too much towards the public. So there might not be a backlash. You're right, but it's definitely not like something they're going to be excited about, right? I mean, there's still like within the public in these countries, there's still some solidarity here and there towards Palestinians. So, you know, it's not to the extent where there'll be a backlash, but I think for them, the biggest thing here, and this I was listening to Trita Parsi, who's, you know, one of the biggest experts on Iran in the United States. He was speaking on the Hill, and he was saying that the UAE and Bahrain, they really needed this deal in order to then go buy more weapons, including F-35 fighter jets from the United States, because they needed to have such an official agreement in order to be able to sell it to them. And now this will just make America, in a way, an even bigger guarantor for them, because they're buying more weapons for them. So if something happens, if they get into a bigger confrontation with Iran or somebody else in the region, well, who else except Iran really, then they can count on the Americans to back them up even more. Or let's say if they attack another country like Yemen. But then again, there aren't that many places in the Middle East that they can attack. So, and this made me think that I think we were talking about a day or two ago, and you were saying that, you know, the Americans want to withdraw a little bit from the Middle East, but this development makes me kind of think, no, not really. What do you think about that? Is that what you said, or am I putting words in your mouth?
No, that is what I said. I like a chance to explain it, of course. But let's start with yeah, I don't think this will play a huge role in Trump's re-election because generally speaking, foreign policy is usually far from people's mind when voting, even things like Afghanistan or Iraq war, which, which leave people dead unless there are significant numbers. Usually general public doesn't tend to care too much. This is true about US. This tends to be true about most countries, that unless you have a significant number of the population uh, dying or being physically injured, general population doesn't care. So no, I don't think it will play a big role, although, sorry.
No, I was going to say exactly. I mean, they cared about the Iraq and Afghanistan at one point, but because, I mean, that had reached such a huge scale, just like you're mentioning in terms of funding and even American debts and everything.
No, no, I mean, to be honest, Iraq and Afghanistan are a good example to compare with Vietnam when there was conscription. So you had people from normal people from across different layers of American society going to the war, and there was a much more significant backlash towards the Vietnam War compared to Iraq and Afghanistan. But anyway, so there is a significant minority in states like Pennsylvania, super Christians, evangelicals, who are extremely. In fact, I think a lot of polls show that majority of American Jewish people don't support a lot of uh, policies of Netanyahu's right-wing government. But the group that provides the most funding and the most support for IPAC and people like Netanyahu, the right-wing elements within Israeli politics, are the super Christians, people in people who support Mike Pompeo, people who are very much represented by Mike Pence. So I think this was designed in many ways to target them in a key swing state, basically. So I don't think it's completely useless. It probably helps to what do you say, bolster the base, make them come out more. But I doubt it will be a significant, especially in the face of economic issues. Usually these type of issues tend to be um, ancillary at best. So yeah, I doubt it will be a big, plays a big role in that.
No, but Sam, that was
But
a super, sorry to interrupt you, but that was a super interesting point because as everybody knows, the US elections are all about winning a state. So, forget about it. Even if 90% of Americans couldn't care less, if you happen to target the right constituents for this would make a much bigger difference than even an issue that could affect everyone, but, still doesn't flip anything within a particular state. So that's actually very interesting.
yeah. To be fair, this is a system in place in a lot of countries. First past the post is a system that leads to a situation where you have to try to win a certain area rather than a certain amount of people necessarily. But that's so I think that's the angle that Trump's team, you know, coming from. From the Bahraini UAE perspective, the Persian Gulf countries, uh, I think they want. There is a. I do think they do fear Iranian imperialism as much as they fear Turkish imperialism. Like uh, I do think some of them at least have fears. It's not just this is not just very cynical arms sales to fill the pockets of some UAE officials or Bahraini officials. I don't think. I mean, I think there is an element of that, but I do think they fear Iran, and I think, to be honest, going back to what you said, which is I think you said that, as you correctly put, Trito Parsi on the Hill said that he thinks UAE and Bahrain they're allowed to get F-35s because previously Israel, at least openly, there are reports that in private Netanyahu was okay with it, but at least openly Israeli government was objecting to the sales of F-35s to UAE and Bahrain. And by the way, according to some reports from a few days ago, Lockheed Martin announced that these airplanes may be manufactured in Israel by the Israelis state aerospace manufacturer. Hope I'll put the links in the box below. It's quite interesting. These are reports, by the way. None of it is officially announced. So now they can get F-35s. As Trita Parsi put it, Arab governments so far have proven themselves somewhat incapable of operating technologies they get from US without the help of US personnel. So this maybe this is more this is more of an act to basically get US hooked into the region. So if there is an issue, if there is a border clash, then they can ask for US to intervene and in their favor against much stronger enemies. Most significantly is Iran, although I do think Arabs also fear Turkey as well. So that's probably one angle, and I agree with that.
Again,
But
the
I
Turkey
do
thing is very interesting that you added that. I haven't heard of that too much or thought about it. That is also very interesting.
I mean, to be honest, Gulf countries like Bahrain and UAE are focused on Iran for sure. But for Saudi Arabia, Turkey is as big of a deal, especially with its increasing influence in Qatar and Pakistan. So, yeah, that's definitely true. I'm sure that's going through the minds of some of the officials, both in the US and in UAE and Bahrain. But at the same time, I think there is a general trend. You, this was happening under Obama. I think he openly said that they should shift their military towards the Pacific region, towards East Asia, and it's happening under Trump as well with the attacks on China, some xenophobic attacks on China. I think what you see is basically America slowly pulling back from the region due to like numerous factors. US has become a large producer of oil and gas. US has spent a significant amount of money in the region and probably hasn't gotten back as much as it wanted. People are tired, and it's basically this region. Countries in this region are not as big of a threat as they used to be, while China has basically become the biggest challenger to US authority, right? So I think, and last year, I believe, or was it 2 years ago, when you had those attacks that were reportedly done by Iranian proxies or Iranian government, right? And US didn't really intervene significantly. I think countries in the region are starting to recognize that US is not going to be there to protect them forever. And because there is that famous deal between Roosevelt and the founder of the Saudi Arabia that the US promises to protect Saudi government in exchange uh, for their oil being traded in dollars, right? And there is basically the same deal with the UAE and other countries in the region. And I think they are increasingly realizing that they may not be that valuable to US anymore, and US may be pulling back from the region. So they are probably trying to form internal alliances to uh, to push back against potential attacks from Iran, from Turkey, from historical hegemons in the region. So I think that's the key and fundamental factor driving this development. Otherwise, I think they would have been happy to keep the situation as it was before.
So you think that the Americans want to be less, perhaps personally involved in the Middle East, and so of course they don't want to let control fall into the Iranians' hand, and at the same time, the allies there, they want to make sure that the U.S. will come to the rescue when needed. So these deals will put in place, and the U.S. will pretty much give more, not seize more power, but give more, let the Gulf countries kind of dictate more what's going on in the region and take care of it, while they also want to shift some of their attention to the Pacific. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, but basically, I'm saying the American presence in the region is too costly for for its potential benefits. It seems It's increasingly not cost effective for the US, right? So
And
I
it,
think that
now they want to prevent them from completely leaving the region by having them more and more involved through arms deals through this way.
oh yeah, I mean I'm sure that's the part of their strategy that basically it's basically sort of buying American military, because when you buy their equipment, and sometimes it's by the way, it's Americans that they sell the equipment but they don't sell the technology, so only they can operate it. So it's not just it's very strange deals in in the military sector. So yeah, it's a way of basically paying for the services that the American military provides for them. But I don't think it would be enough. I think the underlying strategic factors are shifting so fast and shifting so strongly, I suppose, that this won't be enough. But yeah, yeah, I'm sure this is part of the motivation behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, you kind of touched on, I mean, not touched on, you talk about what this means regionally. So, do you have anything else to add on what it means regionally, and why did Qatar not sign a similar deal? I mean, I think behind uh, behind the scenes, maybe they have a similar relationship with Israel, although they publicly they have more the backs of the Palestinians, I would say, than the other Gulf countries. So, what do you make of the fact that they haven't signed a deal with Israel?
Let's just let's have a general regional perspective on the thing. First of all, let's point out that the Bahraini deal with the Israelis are far less of a important than with the UAE one. I believe it's just basically an announcement of understanding or something, some technical proclamation. It doesn't technically mean opening of complete diplomatic relations. I believe it's just the first step towards that. So the Bahraini situation is not equal to UAE situation. This deal was warmly welcomed by Oman and to a lesser extent Saudi Arabia. Uh, but Kuwait and Qatar both somewhat, reacted with some uh, they weren't completely negative, but they did say that it's not a positive development. This is, I think, it's partially due to the Kuwaiti case. It's partially due to the fact that there is a significant minority of Palestinians that used to live in Kuwait for a very long time, like in Iraq. So there is a strong, maybe pan-Arabism, there. Existence within that society. And Kuwaiti society is a far more democratic society than most Arab kingdoms. It has a few, I believe, female parliamentarians that are genuinely elected, not sort of appointed like some other Persian Gulf countries. So I do think that plays a role. When you have a more democratic system, naturally nationalistic Arab voices come out more. I think the same is true about Qatar. In the Qatari case, it's more of a case of a royal family that is very much in line with its society, I think, more than a democratic society. Qataris have a strong relations with Akhwan al-Muslimin, which are Muslim Brotherhood, who are Muslim Brotherhood originates in Egypt, and that's where they used to be strongest. But naturally, because Egypt is next to Gaza, they used to have very strong relations with Palestinians, and the Palestinian cause was extremely important for them. There was a time when Egypt was the biggest enemy of Israel before the peace in Camp David. So there is the historical roots of Muslim Brotherhood in Qatar. Muslim Brotherhood, and by the way, other somewhat extremist, Taliban has had an office in Qatar, in Doha, for a long time. And something that hopefully maybe this episode, maybe in future episodes, we're gonna cover is the peace talks between Taliban and Afghani government that is going on right now in Doha. So yeah, it's you know, there are the peace deal has been seen in the region in variety of different ways, depending on the geopolitical position. But the strongest reaction so far has come from Iran and Turkey. Iran is basically, from the Iranian perspective, UAE, Bahrain, all of these are basically American client states. But the fact that now UAE and Bahrain can now acquire more American military and more sophisticated American military is quite worrying, basically, especially because F-35, I believe, is a stealth airplane.
Meaning?
So, sorry?
Meaning?
A stealth, undetectable by radar. Yeah. Although Iran has anti-stealth technology, but who knows, like, if it's effective against this specific airplane. I haven't checked into it. So Iran, and I think it was important that Iran said that Iran will not tolerate an existence of an American military base on its border or something along these lines. So it was a clear, I think, reference to the fact that, okay, whatever deals you have is fine as long as there is no military built up along our borders, so to speak. And at the same time, you have Erdogan reacting very negatively to the deal, describing it as a stab in the back. Although the Turkey case is it's such a clear political act because, Turkey has diplomatic relations with Israel for plus 70 years, I believe. It's one of the first nations that has recognized Israel. So I don't see Erdogan. I think it's more of a political, he's trying to gain popularity locally. But Iran is very upset by the deal, obviously. Although I think Iran is forced to react angrily. They knew that Israelis and UAE and Bahrain, they've been cooperating for many years now. One of the interesting things, which may be a sign of what is yet to come, was the fact that the person who leads the Friday prayers in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, he started to take a much softer stance on Jews and how Muslims should treat Jews, and he even said that when we look at Muhammad's life, the best way to convert the Jews to Islam was treating them with kindness and nicely. And this is somebody who used to, who some of his speeches could arguably be classified as anti-Semitic towards Jewish people. So we can see a general softening towards Jewish people and Israel in the whole Arab world. And I think soon, maybe not in the next year, but soon, politically speaking, we're going to see Oman and Saudi normalizing relations as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Do you think they'll follow suit? I mean, once the Saudis do it, that will be an even bigger deal. It'd be interesting to see if Trump even tries to rush that and make something happen in the next month or so, but we'll see.
I think Trump is definitely rushing that and exaggerating the deal. Man, I don't know. Did you watch this signing in the White House?
A little bit of it, yeah. It was being shown live everywhere.
It was fantastic. This deal between Arabs and Israel, like pretty much, he was trying to include every nation in Middle East in it. And yeah, he said he spoke to the King of Saudi Arabia and they had a great talk. And yeah, he's trying to push it. He's trying to put them, basically I think his strategy is if I go public with it, they're forced to acknowledge it. So
Yeah. But good job on him. He brokered the deal between countries who were never at war. He brokered the first person to broker peace deal when there wasn't war. So that's also
with like a significant number of countries between them, you know. Yeah. And to be honest, I would have loved to seen a UAE Israeli war. That would have lasted about half an hour before Israel just conquered everything. They just that
yeah.
would have been a very wow. I'm sure Israelis were just, losing sleep over potential UAE attack.
So ridiculous. But man, but I was just thinking the Qataris though, they play a very good footsie game with everyone. Because one other thing I forgot to mention, everybody knows this, but they also have a huge American base there. So they're just like kind of covering themselves from everywhere, still kind of making themselves, look good. Hey, we even let Hamas have an office here. We're trying our best to help out the Palestinians, and they also hold talks for the Taliban in
Well,
Afghanistan.
that's very much that's a survival strategy for Qatar, to be honest, because if they don't do that, they are worried, and it's likely that they would be they're like Kuwait to a lesser extent. Oh, like Bahrain, their foreign policy would be swallowed up by Saudi's foreign policy.
Mhm.
So what they do is try to find these wedge issues and try to basically wiggle a way out for themselves. And to not to mention the fact that this is I believe, the richest country per capita in the world, largely because of the gas. The gas exploration has given them the financial, basically, backing that Bahrain doesn't have to follow its own independent foreign policy.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, I think Qatar is probably significantly richer than Bahrain. I mean, they're going to be, and they're going to be hosting the World Cup in 2 years and all that. So, I mean, they're in much better position than Bahrain and these other smaller Gulf countries in order to fight back against Saudi a little bit and not be completely overshadowed and overtaken by them.
No, you're definitely true. And yeah, while I mean, this is somewhat of an unrelated story, but since we are in the region, I thought we'd talk about this as well. Um, I think you heard about this, but probably not the details. So, I mean, this is how I came across it. There was suddenly a tweet from Trump, as I believe most of his tweets are sudden. There was a tweet from Trump, and then I think he did a speech or something, or maybe it was the speech first, whatever. He said that Iran should be very worried about doing anything in retaliation to the killing of Qasem Soleimani, and if anything happens to U.S. personnel or citizens, I believe the response will be 1,000-fold worse, and Persians will die or so.
So that's
He
the
went,
Iranian general that they killed in Iraq in the beginning of the year, right? And a lot of people
yeah,
thought
yeah,
that this is going to turn into World War III, which made no sense. But anyway.
yeah. That's Qasem Soleimani was a general who was, to be completely, I think, fair. I think it's worth mentioning he was the man most responsible for the defeat of ISIS. I don't think he was a perfect man, but he was
Wait, what's
hugely stuck.
ISIS?
ISIS. What's this? Yeah. Uh, yeah, so and I got interested. That came out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and then apparently there were news. I mean, that was referenced in Trump's tweet apparently as well. There were news reports, not intelligence reports, news reports that there are Iranians are planning to assassinate the U.S. ambassador to South Africa. To give this context, U.S. ambassador to South Africa is it's a typical swamp, swamp person. This is a handbag designer who's a personal friend of Mr. Trump. So, so I believe she was born in South Africa and she knows Afrikaan. So that's actually more than a lot of ambassadors who don't know the language of the host country. But
But wait,
uh,
wait a second. He's saying that they wanted to kill him like 6 months ago or now? Like kill her, sorry, assassinate her in the beginning.
now, no. At the time when they killed Qasem Soleimani, they said it was because he was coordinating attacks against American embassies, which I believe was debunked later by later reporting. Again, I'll put the links down below.
Are you
That was at,
are you
sorry.
suggesting that there were threats? There was nothing ever that specific, especially they never linked it to South Africa or anything like that, right? They were just like they
No,
just
no,
really there were some threats.
no. At the time, they said Qasem Soleimani was coordinating attack against U.S. embassies in the region,
Mhm.
not anything to do with South Africa, nothing. Just now, they are saying Iran was planning to kill the U.S. ambassador to South Africa in retaliation to the killing of
Oh,
Qasem Soleimani 6 months ago, right? This is in retaliation long after.
if that's the case, that's the worst retaliation ever. They killed
Exactly.
a high-level general. And
And I mean, yeah, sure. All governments carry out assassinations abroad. This is nothing new. This is nothing impossible for a government to plan or to even attempt, right? But this is some. I'm. I don't know this ambassador. I haven't really looked into the details of her work, but I don't think she's half as important as the most important general of Iranian
that's
foreign forces.
what I'm saying. Why wouldn't be a good?
Exactly. And why would Iran do such a risky? This is laughable. And there is an Iranian professor from University of Tehran who goes on a lot of programs, and he said, I can't confirm this, that this is being laughed at within Iranian official circles. Basically, this is being laughed at because this is just ridiculous. And in my view, this stinks of there is the sources are unnamed officials, and this is typical bullshit, like the Russian bounty story, like the Chinese hacking stories. I feel like these are stories that are largely aimed at escalating tensions between Iran and US and pushing the two countries towards increased conflict. But it was a quite interesting story, and Iranian officials, by the way, they did deny any such plots, and they said that this is just ridiculous, basically. So now we are done with the Middle East. Please like and subscribe and support us, guys. We really need uh, we we need viewers at the moment. Please make sure you do that. But now let's move on to updates, because to be honest, when preparing this show with Cam this week, we realized there were quite a few updates about the stories we covered during the last few weeks, including the update we just gave you about the UAE-Israeli peace deal. And we're going to cover the updates. So what's the first update that we're going to cover, Cam?
Well, I think you had two really good updates, and these stories have been received very well in our past videos. So really happy about that. So do you want to start with UK EU or you want to start with Turkey Greece?
I'll start with the UK EU one because that one is to be honest, more significant update. Well, the British government managed to successfully pass the Internal Market Bill, the bill that controversially overrides certain aspects of the withdrawal agreement with the EU. Basically, with the withdrawal agreement with the EU required the joint committee of the EU and UK to oversee certain gray areas on the economic issues, including the economic and political issues, including the Irish border issue, right? But UK has accused the EU of negotiating in bad faith and in British government claims that they have attempted to basically safeguard British interest in case that this joint committee doesn't reach any significant or any major deal. EU is accusing British government of breaking international law, of breaking an international treaty that it signed less than a year ago. That's the gist of the thing. But British government, even though there was significant opposition from within the UK, especially in the media, British government managed to successfully pass the internal market bill. But that wasn't the end of the game. British Tory MPs, they wanted to introduce an amendment to make sure that the parliament has the final say. Basically, their problem wasn't the fact that the bill would break international law. Their problem was that it would give the prime minister too much power. So they wanted, if prime minister was to evoke those powers, he had to get permission from the parliament. And British government seemed to have reached a compromise with the rebel MPs, so they won't be introducing that amendment, but that the same process would be worked into the bill. So it seems that British government has basically won over, has won, they're getting their way, basically. EU is still hopeful that Britain will not break international law, although certain lawyers are arguing that even introducing this bill to the House of Commons means that they have already broken international law.
So what they've introduced to the House of Commons is the fact to give more power to the parliament. Is that what's been introduced?
No, the internal market bill, the problem with the internal market bill is that the critics argue that it basically, it addresses things that should be addressed in the joint EU-UK committee. Some people also argue it's a power grab to get power from devolved committees like the Parliament of Scotland or Parliament of Wales, right? So that's the bill, right? But the bill originally allowed the prime minister to do those things, right? Now with the negotiations and the compromise, when the prime minister wants to evoke the powers in the bill, he has to take permission from the parliament.
Got it.
And that's a good way of winning over Brexit fans, because there is obviously certain people who may be racist that support Brexit, xenophobic, but the arguments that they always put forward is that the issue of Brexit is the issue of sovereignty. And now the UK government is basically saying, we are bringing they can argue they are bringing the power back to the parliament, So, and I don't see the Tory government as a nationalistic necessarily government, or as a government that thinks about the British people. But in a way, I don't see what other choice they had, because I tend to agree with them. And I think some of the people who left comments and likes on our previous video agree with us that EU doesn't negotiate in good faith. And I think EU's plan was to basically, drag its feet in the negotiations, like the thing they did with Greece. They do with everybody. And, and the reactions, breaking international law is not something I think that should be applauded ever. Sometimes maybe not all international law is fantastic, but it's not something that it's something you should look at. But when you have people like Tony Blair coming out and saying that, yeah, Boris Johnson, he shouldn't break international law. You broke international law when you invaded Iraq, leading to deaths of millions. So the hypocrisy of the media and these establishment figures like Tony Blair and John Major, just these idiots. It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous, the hypocrisy. And in my view, if you're in the position of UK government and you think that EU is trying to basically drag its feet in negotiations, so then it can blame you for no deal, then it can blame you for because that's what EU does. EU, to be honest, everybody does. All political groups do. They do selective leaks, right? They do selective leaks that benefits them to the media. And when you see that happening with EU every time you negotiate with them, I think this is a good tactic and a good strategy to basically force EU into more real negotiations. But then again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am way too cynical about the EU. But I think the comments, the one comment we had on our video was, was supportive of this argument that, and our commentator pointed out, EU breaks international law quite frequently as well. So, I don't believe the toppling of the Libyan government supported by, although there was a UN resolution passed. So no, that was probably legal. See, not all international law is good anyway. So.
Very true. Very true. Okay, and just something really quick. You mentioned MP rebels. What does that mean?
Well, in the UK, the Tory party. I mean that breaks.
I know it has
Brexit.
nothing to do with this story. I know it has nothing to do with this story specifically.
Sure. But I mean, Tory rebels basically means whichever conservative MP that is rebelling against government policy at that moment. But usually in the UK, you have the situation whenever you have a very pro-EU conservative government, or not very pro-EU, you have a pro-EU like David Cameron or somebody like that. Yeah, you have the Tory rebels that tend to be very anti-EU. Basically, EU is an issue that has divided the Conservative Party for a very long time since it has joined.
So the rebels would be those who don't agree with the official party line?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not like always. But so that's different than, and what's the other term that you hear all the time? What's a shadow cabinet minister or something along those lines in the UK part?
No, that's you rebels you have the government and then you have the shadow government. Shadow government is formed by the opposition, by the biggest opposition party, which is usually Labour. They form the shadow cabinet, which basically they put a shadow for every member of government's cabinet who's responsible to respond to them on the weekly or monthly basis in the parliament. They are
minister, for instance, and then there's always like a shadow foreign minister from the Labour Party, and it's him who him or her who counts the official foreign minister.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the system. But the rebels, which exist in both parties, rebels are whoever goes against the party line or the party whip, and but the most in the last 30 years, I would argue the most significant and most important group of rebels were the Tory anti-EU MPs, because they weren't even a significant minority in terms of numbers, but in terms of actions and getting things done, they were the most probably successful. Like Boris Johnson probably didn't belong to that group, but he ended up enacting a lot of things they wanted. So but every party has its rebels. and they vary depending on the issue. It's very fluid. It's not a very fixed thing. But the shadow cabinet is the opposition party person responsible to hold the government minister to account.
Okay. That's pretty cool. There's one last question on this, and then we move on to our next story. And that this whole shadow concept, does it exist in other places? Like, does the Canadian Parliament have that, or other countries have that
I
in
believe
that way?
I I I I believe Canada and I believe Australia has a similar system, but I really haven't looked into it exactly because I know even though Canadian system is an Australian system, they are very similar in that they are parliaments, but they are also somewhat more federal than UK, so maybe that plays a role. I don't know, but I I'm pretty sure Australia and Canada have shadow cabinets, but I'll definitely check that and get back to you because I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean that's very true. At least in the case of Canada, each province has a lot more power than I would assume in
It's
England.
more it's more like the relationship between Westminster and I would assume Scotland uh, than the relationship between Westminster and like majority of the UK. But yeah.
All right, so now let's talk about two other countries that I think they would agree with your take on the EU more or less, and they have their list of grievances when it comes to the EU. But so tell us, give us the update on Turkey, Greece, and before doing that, just 30 or 50 words, with 30 or 50 words or even less, just tell us what it's about, what the issue is between Greece and Turkey, and then give us the update for this week, please.
Sure. Well, as our viewers know, that was one of the videos that I think got most of the views, and we had a lot of great comments on that pointed out some issues that we didn't cover. There is increased tensions between Turkey, Greece, and you could argue EU over rights to natural resources in the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey claims that the international laws and the treaties from post-World War I treaties are unfair and doesn't address its rights, its I guess God-given rights due to the fact that it has the longest coastline on the Eastern Mediterranean. And at the same time, EU and Turkey and Greece are accusing Turkey of using gunboat diplomacy, using strongman tactics. Especially, they are focusing especially on Erdogan. Macron is very sorry. Macron is very clear in focusing on Erdogan and saying that he has no problem with Turkish people, but Erdogan is a aggressive leader. This seems to be largely due to the fact that there is increasingly they are finding gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, and countries like Turkey, Greece, Egypt, Israel, Palestine, and Jordan and Italy, they all and apparently France, even though it doesn't really have doesn't have much coastline, they all want to exploit that natural resource. This kind of this probably in an interesting way ties into our other stories in a way about gas and Nord Stream 2 and Russia, because as we see, both Turkey and EU are very much hungry for gas, for cheap gas, for cheap energy. So so they're all after that. And our viewers, the people who left comments, they mostly argued that Turkey is on the wrong because they have a legal option they can pursue, but they don't because they know they can get more through their aggressive foreign policy. I kind of see their point because they and to
some kind
so,
of court or something, or taking this dispute to a court or something? What are these legal means that they're referring to?
Oh, uh, I believe there is an international arbitration court they can use to, and I don't remember the specific legal means, to be honest, but there are legal means for them to negotiate a more balanced settlement,
Yeah.
which they don't pursue, which then, that's the argument, which then leads Greece to push for its maximalist arguments on its territory, because what Greece argues is that the islands of Greece should be counted as as same as the territory of Greece, even though some of them are uninhibited.
So the buffer zone, so they mean that the buffer zone, that there should be a buffer zone for the islands too. So anything within that buffer zone that in other cases would fall under that country's power, they want that to fall under their territory, as if it was the ocean or the sea just on their main border.
Exactly. And they're like, again, last week, Cyprus government, which is basically the Southern Cyprus government, which is a pro-Greece government. They again accused of Turkey of illegal drilling, illegal exploration of the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, but the tensions seem to be easing. Thankfully, Turkey seems to be open to talks, and Greece seems to be open to talks now. Although the relation between Turkey and France seems to have, remains very tense, basically. And but the update I wanted to give, that I definitely see the argument that Turkey has a legal, when I looked into it, Turkey definitely has a legal option that can lead to a negotiated settlement that benefits every party. But I do think there are issues from the Turkish perspective. There are two issues from the Turkish perspective. One is that they seem to have lost all trust in EU and international bodies and international players. Especially they feel snubbed on the joining of the EU issue. They feel snubbed on the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum uh, uh, issue, because they weren't included, but Egypt and even Palestinian territories were included.
Wow.
So, sorry.
I said, wow.
Oh yeah, and so they feel definitely snubbed, and there may have been racial or xenophobic elements to the fact that why they were snubbed.
And there's also
But
a migrant deal that they had made with the EU that's completely fallen apart now.
yeah, that's I think that's more of a result of these
Mm-hmm.
things. So and there are strong elements within Turkish military who are promoting this idea of called blue homeland, which they say it's quite interesting, because I'm Iranian. I come from uh, some of my background is Turkish, and there is this general historical thing that Turks were afraid of water, because this is something that in Game of Thrones has inspired certain elements in Game of Thrones, because they're not afraid of water, they're afraid of sea or oceans, because horses, they don't drink salt water, and because the Turkish nomadic tribes, they regarded horses as divine animals and stuff. They wouldn't, they regarded uh, salt water somewhat fearfully. But this has changed in the last 100 years, and now there are certain people within Turkish military who are strong believers of this concept of a blue homeland. So I think politicians like Erdogan are somewhat under pressure to what do you say, to, I suppose, to address these um, to address these internal requests for an increased, for an increased nationalism. So I don't know how much Erdogan necessarily believes in this blue homeland concept, but when you have people, pressuring you from inside, then you're forced to sometimes act externally.
Yeah.
And but I do see that, Turkey is acting like a strong man to an extent when it comes to Greece. But then again, you have to, from Turkish perspective, Greece is a former what do you say, a former state they've lost. I don't think this is a necessarily a justified way of looking at things, but that's how they view things. So that's probably why they don't they don't seek a more peaceful way of resolving these things, because they see themselves as a rightful owner of all of these lands and waters.
Interesting. Okay. So pretty much there are talks going on now then, but they haven't reached anything.
No, but yeah, tension has eased significantly. Both parties seem to have backed down, kind of like the India-China story, which, to be honest, that was quite interesting, because I said I can't see how they can reduce tensions, and then a week later, both India and China announced that they're gonna withdraw all their troops very quickly. So yeah, same seems here they've just started talks, but hopefully it will lead to easing of tensions. Turkey seems to be continuously pushing its exploration and its drilling agenda nonetheless, though.
Okay, interesting. All right, so everyone, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And we're going to give an update on the US election. But before that, I have two small updates I wanted to share. One, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that last week mentioned how the Oxford trial was stopped. And I said that this could be for the coronavirus. And I mentioned how this can be quite consequential. But it seems that they have resumed, at least that's what they've said, they've resumed the trial. And they're saying that this horrible side adverse effect that happened to one of the participants didn't have anything to do with the vaccine. That's what I've said. But I mean, just one thing that I'm finding very, very concerning in a way here is that, all this talk about transparency and all this, everything that happened with the Oxford trial and the pausing lacked complete transparency. Apparently this happened on a Sunday and only on the following Wednesday in a small meeting with people from Wall Street or something along those lines. The CEO of the pharmaceutical company mentioned that it had stopped, and then again they resumed. I don't think they've put out any official communication. Their excuse is kind of, giving out patients information, although nobody asked who this happened to, just asking what this happened. It kind of reminds me of whenever you talk about war and they say, oh, you can't give the details of our soldiers. I mean, nobody said give the details of your soldiers. So anyway, just the lack of transparency there is a bit concerning. That's the only thing I have there. But on the other side, you can say positive thing is that they've resumed the trial of this Oxford vaccine, which last week I argued is probably the most important one because, it's associated with Oxford. So it's getting, it has a little bit, let's say, good press behind it, although their behavior with this part should kind of make people to be more fearful. So that was one thing. Do you have anything to add on that, or should I just move on?
No, I just read that they resumed a study. I didn't know about the details. You just told me, but yeah, that's quite.
Oh, sorry, I forgot one thing. However, because the trial, the phase 3 trial is going on in the UK, in South Africa, I believe maybe in UAE also, and they're going to start Russia. And there was some going on in America, but apparently in the US is the only place where the FDA hasn't given approval for resuming the trials. So that's just one piece that I've heard. I need to double check, but I did double check at least in one article. And like I said, there hasn't been any official communication on this. So people are just kind of hearing here and there and putting articles together, which is quite sad. But so yeah, total lack of transparency. I would say right now, like absolutely total lack of transparency. So now going the next story that I have. So last week I went a bit on a rant about gender reveal parties, how not only they can be dangerous, such as causing the wildfires in the United States, but they also reinforce gender stereotypes. And now just last week, this couple who I believe like some kind of Instagram influencers, and they're Syrian background, and this has a little bit to do with the story too, living in the UAE, and they had a gender reveal party. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard that Dubai has the world's tallest building. And pretty much the gender reveal party done a way that the tower, the tallest tower in the world, would either turn pink if it was a girl or blue if it was a boy, and it turned blue. Now, interestingly, this had quite a bit of backlash, and the backlash had three different aspects to the backlash. One is some were saying, hey, look at what's going on in the US, and now you're having this huge gender. I mean, this had nothing to do with fire or anything like that. I think it just lit blue. So that was just one clash that people.
Sorry, I don't understand. What? I don't understand what's going on in the US.
So in the US with the wildfires, you remember how the gender reveal party has been accused of being the.
All right, but come on, like that. Yeah, how does that relate to a tower turning pink or blue?
Because it had to do with the gender
Okay, anyway.
party. I agree with you, but that's what one level of the backlash came. And then some people within that were also adding that, hey, this reinforces gender stereotypes, which I was really happy to see because that is my point of view. I think these gender reveal parties have turned really reinforced gender stereotypes. And apparently the person who is credited for being the first person for accidentally throwing a gender reveal party, I believe in the States, she's come out and she's saying, hey, this is ridiculous, please stop. But again, they're talking about how this can be dangerous, a lot of them. And then the third level of backlash that this couple received is the fact that they're of Syrian background. So people were saying, what a waste of. It's unclear who paid for this to happen. That I couldn't get. But anyway, they're saying it's such a wasteful thing to do this. So what I've reached with this, when I was reading a few of these articles and all of them kind of mentioning these three layers of backlashes, I think gender reveal parties, I wouldn't be surprised if they would come to an end in a year or two because they're receiving some quite bad media publicity. And so whether they go away because people think they're dangerous, that's okay. But it's good that at least the message that reinforces gender stereotypes is somewhat, even though likely all these mainstream articles included that in their coverage. So I was glad to see that. But that was just my little update, and that made me happy when I saw this week.
I love it. It's like I've never seen your crusade against gender reveal parties. It's just you take it so seriously as well. Yeah, in 2 years it's gonna be gone. This disgusting gathering.
That's the prediction.
I don't understand how what is the criticism there, that because they're of Syrian background, like.
Yeah, I think that was the criticism kind of there. That was just.
I'm sorry, but that you can say that, like, except Norway or Switzerland, every nation you can say, oh, you're from that nation, there are still poor people in that area, or that is, I mean, I don't like gender reveal parties, but I don't understand this intense hatred.
No, I agree with what you just said about that. I agree with that. And I also agree that, in the US, it caused fires because of the way that gender reveal party was carried out. This one didn't have anything to do with explosives or fire.
Because you mentioned the wildfires.
Sorry?
Because you mentioned the wildfires. I mean, I was actually, the wildfires, the reason why, I don't know if you saw some of the satellite images, but the wildfires are, some of the pictures I saw, the area they covered was bigger than New York State, or certain countries, right? This is not because of gender. I mean, I'm sure that didn't help, but this is because of dried out trees. This is because of climate change. This is because of lack of forestation, so I do think media likes to scapegoat, or this is clickbaity stuff.
No,
but sure. Yeah, but but
And,
sorry.
no, exactly. I mean, it did seem like that gender reveal party, that story hasn't changed. It did lead to some fire, but of course, I shouldn't have actually used the
No,
word.
no. Look, if it like usually human caused fire would go out after, you know what I mean? When it becomes this, this is like, this is a end of times fire. Have you seen the sky of
No,
San
no,
Francisco?
sorry, forget about that. Like, they didn't mean the whole wildfire, but they mean the
Yeah,
fire that were caused.
but I would still clarify my position as yeah, fuck gender reveal parties. Yeah.
And I think at
Just
the heart of it, the issue is that not in everyone's head, perhaps it is, it has to do with gender stereotypes and reinforcing them. But I think in a lot of cases it does. And last week got into the colors and everything. But okay, so that was my update for this week. Those were my two updates. And then we have a final update, which is on the US election. So I'll throw it back to you.
So I don't know if you have any updates about the U.S. elections. The couple of news I came across, the interesting one was the uh, voice recording from Trump, Bob Woodward, if I'm not mistaken. He interviewed him during the early days of Corona pandemic in the U.S. and the exact time when he was saying that this is nothing, this is, I believe he was even saying this is less significant than the flu even. He told Bob Woodward, he was saying that no, this is very dangerous, more dangerous than the flu. I'm sorry.
Bob Woodward?
He's a famous journalist that was interviewing Trump for a book. So you have and yeah, he was downplaying it, and he said that I'm downplaying it because I don't want to cause panic. This came out about a week ago. A lot of people were very angry. He got asked about it in a town hall with George Stenopoulopoulos. Sorry, excuse my pronunciation. And
That town hall was.
I mean, to be honest, I think he stand the outrage. I think he could have. I think I think he should have played it differently. In that he should have said, he should have focused on, I wasn't trying to cause a panic aspect. Maybe that was the only way for him to get out of it. But at any rate, it's pretty bad. It's not good for him. And majority of polls, again, especially in key states that we were talking about earlier in the episode, majority of the polls again show Biden significantly ahead of him in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that type of place, Florida. So things are not looking good for Trump. Interestingly, though, Bob Woodward himself was criticized by a lot of people, including David Sirota, former campaign contributor of Bernie Sanders, for not coming out with this information 3-4 months ago at the time, because this puts basically public health in danger, and I don't see much there, but I guess, yeah, but I don't think it would have helped that much, because I don't think people pay too much attention to what Trump says about this issue anyway, but maybe I'm wrong. Yeah. So, and you had another week of pathetic pandering by Biden campaign to the youth and the minorities. He played he played a song from it's apparently a famous song.
Yeah, oh my God. When I read the article about that, it sounded so much better than when I actually saw the video. I wish
Oh shit! Yeah, I saw the video first. It was yeah.
I saw the video, because when I read the article, I thought it was more of these general ones. Like, I thought they played the music in the background, and he kind of walked out, and maybe, like, I don't know. In my head, I thought maybe he did like a cool step or something, something like conventionally boring and
You see, like
eutherish.
did they?
But
Why did they have him?
huh?
Like why did they have him trying to find it on his phone or something?
Exactly. That's
He doesn't.
so
He,
awkward and so weird. It was
like
actually
asking
worse than usual.
grandpa to use a Spotify. Like, come on. Like, what are you doing?
Terrible. What did he say as soon as he played it? He just said something stupid. Like, I wish I was half as talented as you guys to
I,
do.
I don't remember. But and I don't know if this was before last week's episodes or not, but there was that interview between Kamala Harris and Obama, in
I,
which they talked about how Joe Biden loves ice cream and and spaghetti with red sauce. You know, really important issues that affect all of us around the world, and you know, it's pathetic. It's yeah, I mean, I guess it's when you don't have a popular policy, it makes sense. This strategy makes sense, but at the same time, it's unbelievable how even last election wasn't this devoid of policy talk. This is like this is level of pandering, level of empty talk is just. I'm hoping as we get closer to election, maybe we see more serious discussions. But this week, every week they just top themselves with another pathetic series of pandering.
no, absolutely, just so ridiculous. But yeah, the Despacito. We'll add the clip. We'll add the clip to the video so people can see it here.
I don't know if we can add the clip. We copyright stuff.
Oh, because
Yeah,
of the
but
okay.
but but we'll add a picture at least
Yeah.
of the clip.
Maybe we forgot to mention, but as always, we put the links about everything we pretty much talked about in the description box below.
By the
And
way, please like and subscribe, if not for anything else, for the fact that this negativity spreads about this type of pandering. Maybe there is stop. I don't. Maybe if they see it doesn't work, but I don't. Even looking at data, I don't see any. I guess I have. Maybe I haven't looked into it enough, but I would be interested into seeing studies to that study how effective these type of panderings are, you
yeah,
know, in swaying people. So maybe they're effective. I doubt it. So let's like and subscribe to spread the hate against like good pandering. You know, give us good pandering, please. Policy pandering.
exactly.
Okay, so Cam, you said that you have some news about Yemeni war and Saudis and some UN initiative. Yeah, no, I don't know anything about it, to be honest.
Yeah, so I found this to be really astonishing. So pretty much the UN Under Secretary for Humanitarian Affairs. So this is a person that Gutierrez nominated him, and he heads like the UN's humanitarian side of their work, right? So he went in front of the Security Council this Wednesday, and he told them that Yemen, famine could come back and hit a lot more Yemenis. And the reason for that is, and he singled out these countries, and I'll tell you why he singled it out, and is that the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait as well, but forget about Kuwait, UAE and Saudi Arabia have given a total of $0 to the UN humanitarian appeal for Yemen this year. So the UN humanitarian appeal is this huge appeal that they put out every year, and it kind of includes the appeals that a lot of other smaller UN organizations and non-UN organizations, they all come a part of this. So let's say Oxfam might also do its own appeal, or other organizations that are not part of UN might have their own appeal. But usually that's included in the big one that they call for the UN humanitarian appeal, or at least it's part of that too. So this is huge. This would include all of the money that UNHCR would get, that UNICEF would get. All of them, they'll be part of this. They call it the UN humanitarian appeal, and there is for all kinds of countries. And of course, Yemen had it because it's a war-torn country right now, and over 80% of the population needs humanitarian aid. So this year, they've given nothing. They've given $0. So the humanitarian appeal for Yemen right now is around 30% funded, and we're in September. So it should have been around somewhere 75%. And the fact is, a lot of times, for instance, if you take the humanitarian appeal of Somalia or Sudan, these countries that don't get that much attention in the media, it rarely surpasses 40%. But in Yemen, the last 2 years, it was 90% funded. And largely thanks to, well, the two countries are responsible, a large part of why Yemen has reached this spot, which is the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So the UAE and Saudi Arabia would fund the humanitarian appeal a lot, give a lot of money, and in a way use this to shield themselves from criticism about their activities and bombing the country, pretty much. But now this year they've decided they don't want to give any. Saudi Arabia has pledged 300. And once again, the head of the UN Secretary General, the Under Secretary General for humanitarian side of the UN said that, pledging money and not giving it is terrible, making such promises. And this is a big tactic. When I first did my first internship at the UN, someone told me that, a lot of time the Saudis and other countries too, but especially Saudis are known for this. They pledge money. So then they put out the press release, Saudi Arabia will give X million dollars to blah, blah, blah. And then you never see that money. Granted, they do give a lot of money a lot of times. Just mentioned the humanitarian appeal was 90% funded for the last 2 years, which allowed the UN to increase its humanitarian support from 8 million Yemenis to 12 millions over the past 2 years. And now they're saying they're going to have to cut down substantially since it is only 30% funded. So I wanted to ask you this. I mean, let's forget about all the misery that this will be causing by not funding the humanitarian appeal, which is in response of their own actions anyway. So it's not even a good thing in that sense. But this sounds like to me is that the UAE and Saudi Arabia are completely changing the strategy over Yemen, and they think that they probably don't need this kind of PR attention anymore, that perhaps, they're going to keep on cutting back their involvement there and just cut their losses now. And if they've made any gains whatsoever, so like for instance, a few weeks ago, you mentioned how UAE has taken control over this Yemeni island. So, whatever they managed to do until now, which is not much, Saudi Arabia 100% doesn't have control all over of the country. They don't even have control of the capital. But yeah, do you think the fact that they're not funding the humanitarian appeal here is that, hey, listen, we're going to stop bombing them now anyway, so we don't care about all the misery that's created now and the years and years that people have to live with this misery, but we're not too interested in Yemen anymore in this sense? What do you make of this?
To be honest, I'm not sure exactly. I don't know who is the decision makers behind this specific
But the reason
decision.
I'm asking you this also is because last few weeks ago when we talked about Saudi Arabia removing its general from Yemen, if I remember correctly, you were talking about Saudi Arabia wants to reduce its involvement, if I'm not mistaken. So I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth again. And I feel like this further confirms that.
Yeah, there were some leaks, I think about 2 years ago, that Mohammed bin Salman was looking to ways to reduce Saudi involvement in the region. And the situation seemed to have evolved into a stalemate at this point. Although it is hard to believe that Saudis will allow a Shia government to exist, a Shia-led government or a Shia government, it's not quite clear, exist right at its border. I'm not quite clear on that, but I do think, generally speaking, especially they're facing huge economic issues right now because of oil prices and partially because of the Yemeni war. So I do think, yes, they're trying to reduce their presence there. I agree with you. It's probably now they see less reasons for because these things, I personally think these type of charitable action are largely state propaganda, right? It's buying you good press and all that. So I think they see less reasons for that. And yeah, kind of makes sense. Yeah, now that they're probably gonna pull back at some point soon as well um, from the war. Yeah, kind of makes sense
Yeah.
for them to stop. And you said by the way, UAE and Kuwait, right?
UAE, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia have pledged 300. So, who knows? Maybe last minute they give something. I mean, 300 million is absolutely.
To be honest, yeah, I guess and in a way they see it as a like we give any money we want, we give it to the government we support because this money maybe some small parts of it may get to Houthis. So
Yeah, but I mean, just like we were talking about PR and all this, there's nothing safer than, to put out a press release by the UN, saying that the money's going there. It's good, and a little small tangent story on the side, the Saudis are really king of this kind of public relations through money. So if anybody follows the English Premier League, this whole summer there were talks about the Saudis buying Newcastle United, which is a football team from England. Although it's not one of the best teams, it has a really good name recognition to it. And once upon a time, it was really a team. And from the beginning, I was suspicious about this. And of course, this didn't happen. I think the Saudis are blaming that the body that looks over the English it took too long to give the green light, although I don't see why they wouldn't want that money. It would be huge. It would even raise the profile and the players in the English Premier League a lot. I mean, got UAE, Abu Dhabi already owns a football team, Man City. I'm sure a lot of people heard about this. So it's no ethical issue or something like that from the Premier League. I never bought that. And I think it's just the Saudis never had any intentions because a lot of people, it's common that, people who aren't too much into the news or politics, they think that the Saudis have unlimited amount of money. And they have a lot of money, but nobody has unlimited amount of money. Even Jeff Bezos, if you take 99.99999% of his money, even he won't have any money, like Saudis have a lot of money. And I was thinking, because the Saudis couldn't just take over Newcastle, buying them doesn't cost a lot, but then they finished 10th, that's not good PR, that's bad PR. They had to put in millions and hundreds of millions every single year. And I didn't see them at this time, being really willing to do that. So it's just another clear-cut example of me where Saudis pretend like they're gonna, give a lot of money to either a cause or buy like, some kind of business like the Newcastle football team, but at the end, nothing there. So nothing has happened. I mean, the league has started now, and I think the talks are dead. So yeah, it's just another example kind of fit with this one in a way. But okay, so that was my update there. What's our next update? What do we have? I think it was celebrities boycotting Facebook and Instagram.
Please like and subscribe to our channel. We need all the views we can. And now I think there's going to be we both going to go on a bit of a rant, to be honest. I think you brought this news to my attention, at least. So go ahead, tell everybody what's this so-called news about.
I think it was about a month ago or so, and like Coca-Cola and other big companies said that, hey, we're not going to be running any campaigns on Facebook or anything like that for a month. And they're protesting that Facebook is not doing enough to combat hate on their channel, on their platform, but also misinformation. And then they say, this is undermining the American elections. So around Tuesday or Wednesday, a bunch of huge celebrities, including Kim Kardashian, also said the exact same thing, and they joined this campaign. And for a total of one day, these few celebrities didn't post anything on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, wait! It was for a total of one day. I didn't read into that. Like they're now back on it.
Apparently, after when you're talking, I'll double check Kim Kardashian's Instagram channel to be sure, but that's what I read. It was for a total of one day. Now, let's say for Black Lives Matter, it was also for one day where everybody put a black post. But that was a coordinated thing involving everybody in the world. Not everybody in the world, but a big movement, So not everybody is not gonna post anything. But
I'm sorry. No, I'm even that to me. I just think these type of
even that. But I mean, a handful of celebrities, and you're so passionate about this issue, you just take one day off posting on Facebook, and it's just ridiculous. And I mean, you know what I think, where I stand on this is that yes, Facebook should be doing everything that it can, and no one is perfect. Things are still going to slip through the cracks. Anything that isn't allowed with free speech, whether it's in traditional newspapers on the streets, anything that is not allowed with free speech, which is a lot of things, you know, you can threaten people, and it's fine. Facebook should try its best to prevent such messages on its platform. But that's one part of the issue. The other one is that they're so reductionist with this, and they're blaming everything that happened with going on in the US. And, you know, as if before Facebook, the US had a tremendous democracy. I mean, everything was just rosy. There was no hate. Racism didn't exist. Jim Crow and all this. What are we talking about? I think Facebook was working undercover back then and making sure that all these things spread. And, you know, it just falls into the bigger story about Russiagate in a way. You can link it to that, you know, blaming the US election on Russiagate, although we all well know that Trump didn't even win by the popular vote. They played the game better than Hillary Clinton, and they got more states and delegates, and blah, blah, blah. They won that. And then I think this also, you know, one other thing that bothers me is fake news. When people talk about fake news, and, you know, they're saying that Facebook spreads fake news, it makes it sound like fake news to me means that the story is factually incorrect, right? Saying that, you know, this is black, although it's white. Now that's an issue that's not good, but that only, like, you know, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the terrible media coverage. You know, even if it's not fake news, media coverage can be extremely misguiding and spread misinformation by omitting important information. And that is real media criticism that's been going on forever. So, and I think fake news is just a small part of that and falls within that. But this whole obsession about fake news completely disregards all the issues with mainstream media, where they don't necessarily say stories that are not factually correct. They just conveniently and deliberately leave out like the most important aspects of the story and just say whatever is in line with their agenda. So I think that's kind of the first part of my rant, at least. So I'll throw it back to you, and you tell me what you think about this, or if there's anything else you want to talk about. And let me check while you're talking if Kim Kardashian is still active on Instagram or not.
All right. No, I largely agree with you. What I would say, my biggest problem with this is that I think, freedom of speech is increasingly coming under attack from a very self-righteous group of people who think they know better than everyone, and they are the arbiters of decorum and how people should speak and what they should speak about and what words they should use. To be honest, sadly, I largely agree with them in terms of morality, but I don't agree with them that I don't think Facebook is responsible for what people write on there, no more than the Daily Mail is responsible for the people who purchased that, hateful newspaper, So I don't really see any difference between the people who wanna ban people who want these platforms to enforce very stringent regulations, and between the people who wanted to burn books. Basically, this is, to me, they seem like the same type of people, no matter how self-righteous they think they are for whatever reason. And I think it's disgusting, and I think the traditional media uses this type of action basically to achieve its own goal, which is basically not allowing the growth of new media like YouTube or other source of news, alternatives. To be honest, platforms were alternative sources of news have somewhat of a more equal opportunity access to audience. That's I think that they don't like that. They don't like that on a lot of platforms. They have to compete with a smaller media companies, and it's it's disgusting. And generally online activism, I think, to be honest, we are doing a news, sort of a political news show, so you could argue this is sort of an online activism, but I like to think this is more of an analysis, and I am not really that delusional to think this, or even my dream, like end goal of what this channel could be, could really change anything about anything in this world. So I'm generally very suspicious and negative about any online activism, including putting, because, and it's so selective, when, for example, when there are terrorist attacks in the West, usually there is all this outpouring of grief, and people expressing their grief for the victims and all that. But then when you have a more international perspective, you feel like it's so highly selective, and it ignores so many other tragedies, and tragedies are happening every day. That's it's just, I rather not do any, because than just do a very famous few, to really to basically say, look how good of a human being I am. It's all around, I think it's disgusting. And these people are basically modern day book burners, as far as I'm concerned. And what can you expect? These are basically celebrities trying to maximize attention for themselves. So in a way, I guess they are just grifters. So I guess I shouldn't really begrudge them, but it's not nice.
Yeah. And I just checked her, Kim Kardashian's Instagram. She started reposting 4 days ago. So everything good. People can find her there. The post before that says a week ago. So I don't know if she did take 3 days off, but I don't think so, because that would be before when this came out a week ago. So I think she probably didn't post just naturally for a day or so, or it's just Facebook, Instagram, the way it's counting the days. So at the very most, she
By
was
the way,
2 days.
this is nothing new. This is just like John Lennon staying, I don't remember for how long, in his bed because of the Chinese oppression and the Chinese situation. And it's like, oh, I'm sure the Chinese government was so upset that John Lennon, or now face, like, the sad thing is, sadly, these days, companies like Twitter, at least, less Facebook, less so, do cave into this type of pressure. I kind of wish they were a bit more, they had a stronger backbone, like the Chinese government. Not that I, endorse oppressing people by the Chinese government, but it's just this type of activism is pathetic.
Yeah.
In my view.
One or two small things, and then we'll wrap up this thing. And one is that I think me and you were both quite pessimistic when it comes to activism, but I don't want to make it sound like, at least I think that activism at times in some situations can be fruitful. And just to mention Kim Kardashian, I'm not even talking about that kind of activism, but Kim Kardashian, apparently she helped at least get one or a handful of people who were wrongly imprisoned out, which is great. Just even one person not being in jail for absolutely no reason is a great thing. So total credit when it comes there. But I think just their attack on Facebook, the best thing I can say is that it's completely misguided and reductionist. Yes, talk about Facebook, but that's only one issue. And don't forget about mainstream media that's been spreading this information since God knows when, in a much more expert and nuanced way.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. Again, guys, please like and subscribe, especially if you want, these type of rants, the calmest rants you've ever heard to,
And
become
as
popular.
soon as we have at least like more views, we're going to start inviting uh, get experts in specific areas. So it's not all just
Oh,
rants,
I thought you're gonna,
us to
I
Japan
thought you're gonna,
giving our opinion about everything and anything.
yeah, I thought you're gonna say we're gonna invite like experts, like professional ranters.
I think that was kind of covered. Yeah, okay.
Anyway,
So
so let's get to
not
the.
the real story now, Joe.
All right. So let's get to our last story, right? Which is I was quite surprised because we haven't discussed this story, but I was surprised of your initial reaction of the headline. So there was this offer by I think a producer on or a guest on Joe Rogan's show that said that a 4 hour debate between Joe Biden and Trump, no audience, Joe Biden moderating and all that. And then Trump made headlines when he retweeted that with I want a part of that. Basically, I do want a part of that. And but I believe there hasn't been any official response from Biden camp, but some of his sort of spokespeople have said that no, we don't think that would be appropriately based on previous comments made by Joe Rogan. I thought, in my view, I don't think it's ever going to happen, but I do think it would be a good idea for it to happen.
I
But
mean,
I think you have the opposing view, if I'm not mistaken.
no, the thing is not really, but I tell you why I was just thinking, it's because, okay, I mean, the Biden response and saying that Joe Rogan, used the N-words and all this. I mean, I'm quite into MMA, so I know Joe Rogan a lot from there. And I only watch his podcast episodes really when they involve MMA fighters, not so much about these other topics that he gets into. But these accusations are baseless. If he's made mistakes and said things wrongly, he's often come out and apologized about them. And he has 3 hour podcast. Let's not forget he's a stand-up comedian. Okay. So I think some of these things were taken out of his stand-up comedy material, like some of these criticisms, which is just absolute bullshit. So let's forget about that. But it's funny, you said a guest suggested it. So this guest of his, and I didn't watch didn't watch this episode, although it was a fighter. So his name is Tim Kennedy, and he is very much famous for, he used to be in the US Army. So he's one of the few, he's a former UFC fighter, he's a bit older now, but he's like a super outspoken right-wing pro-gun guy. So that's the angle that he's coming from. So I'm sure he's super, super pro-Trump, of course. So he's just saying that. And I mean, what really, it's just how pathetic things have gone into that. Okay, Joe Rogan is the best person to do this. Nothing against Joe Rogan, but it's not a debate if it's like a podcast and they come and talk and he just says this and they kind of talk over each other or just say whatever. And then if it's going to be an actual like debate, then it's going to resemble, I think, kind of like a normal debate. And why would it? And they don't have anything to say for 4 hours. Even what is Trump going to say for 4 hours? That's just what didn't get me excited coming from there. I just found it to be so stupid and baseless, and it's never going to happen. And I mean, if we've reached such a pathetic place in life, I mean, let's just
Wow.
forget about it.
I mean, look,
So I'm
I
fired up.
don't know.
Fired up.
I've seen debates as far as they go back. I love watching some of the old footages. So I don't think there was ever that high quality of questioning of candidates anyway. I do actually think, I don't know, I completely disagree. I think now that you say that, the person who suggested it was a like hardcore right winger, the 4 hour part of it makes sense because that's clearly designed to, destroy Biden because he can barely stay awake more than half an hour.
I don't know.
So,
I think with the right
but
amount of doping and drugs, he could.
sorry.
I think with the right amount of doping and drugs, he could pull it off.
4 hours, yeah, but it's definitely to Trump's advantage. It's like Trump's home court. But I think
But even
I don't know. I think Joe Rogan would have been
even
sorry.
Trump would struggle. Even Trump would struggle because he wouldn't get to talk for 4 hours. I mean, of course, he's gonna have to let Joe talk, and he's gonna have to let Biden talk, and I can see him like dosing off.
No, no. Well, to be honest, I think it would be really good. I think Joe Rogan would have asked really good questions, probably. Probably, to be honest, legalization of marijuana would have definitely come up something that there is a good chance would not come up, and with good arguments, not from a, are you gonna, are you gonna allow our children to use drugs and kill them? You know, like what I mean, like not in a,
Yeah. No, no,
not
I want
not
to,
framed in a very anti
but
legalization framework.
yeah, that
And wait. And I've seen Joe Rogan moderate two different debates. One about a documentary um, about bodybuilding and vegetarian diet, and one about uh, like potential civ- like ancient history and debates surrounding Egyptian structures and all that. And I think he's actually a really good moderator. And then you have the other producer person sort of checking stuff. So I don't know. I disagree. I completely think it would have been a great idea, to be honest.
kind of changed my mind here a tiny bit, but I'll just say a tiny bit because you just pointed out the areas that Joe Rogan has expertise in. I mean, he's been talking about that forever. He spends like most of his day talking about nutrition and working out and all of that. So again, that fell into his area. I mean, and he has other things, and I've seen other debates on him. You're right. He is not too bad. But I mean, outside of those issues and just how ridiculous it is that we've reached there. If not, sure, I think we would get more out of a 1 hour, I think 1 hour, 1 or 2 hour Joe Rogan moderated debate than the normal one. That is true,
Yeah,
although
yeah. And did you watch his interview with Bernie Sanders? That wasn't a,
no,
it
that was
wasn't the deepest interview, but it was pretty good. They did address like criminal reform and all that.
yeah, in a podcast format like that. But I mean, it's just that it's going to turn into like, yeah, debate. I just didn't see.
I find it difficult to believe how would he or any like that like controlling Trump in that environment, in a more freewheeling environment. Trump would, I think it. I don't know. I think he might. It might be to his advantage. It might cause him to actually say some stuff that are so controversial. Although I don't know. It would have been interesting. I don't think it's ever gonna happen,
And
but
the reason
it
that
would
it's
have been really.
whatsoever is also one reason that I was just like, I mean, it's just too much wishful thinking in a way.
It does. I mean, the act of suggesting it in such a public and open way is probably a bit of a bit of a PR attack on like because Biden is the one who has to refuse. But still, I think that's in their benefit than Biden actually doing the thing. So
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know why I just like, even though what you're saying, you agree, I don't know why it just, as
doesn't feel right.
odd, yeah, it wasn't appealing to me. Although I see these points that you're saying, and I mean, it's not like the normal debates. I found them intriguing whatsoever. I mean, they're the worst thing. The questions, you're right. So you want every kid out there to smoke until they die?
So Medicare for all. So you want all of us to go bankrupt, right? You socialist piece of shit.
I love that. I love whenever they say about the Medicare one. I love when they say that people like their doctors. It's just like fine, okay, and they're not going to take away their doctors and still keep talking. Then the second one is like, oh, they really like their plans. I've never heard anybody who's like emotionally attached to an insurance plan beyond
Yes.
benefits. So if the other one brings more, like this one offer
To
more
be
for this.
fair, that's where Democrats, like the establishment Democrats at least, and Republicans, they betray their real alliance because the only people who do like their plans are really high-end professional, high earning professional people, professional class, because they have great probably health plans, right? So, and that's the people they hang out with, they see, they represent. So yeah, they love their plans, I guess. They don't they're not, they're probably not more than 5% or 15% of the population at most, but you know, they do like their plans.
No, no, they really love their plan. Here's a better plan. No, 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 no. You know, me and this plan,
Yes.
we go way
Way
back.
back.
This is the most ridiculous thing. But yeah, I think that's it. And I heard and Joe Rogan moved to Texas recently. Did you hear that?
Yeah, yeah. He moved to, I don't know, Nevada, Texas,
He's
somewhere. Yeah.
getting a lot of backlash. I was reading the comments. His studio is like nowhere near as nice.
Yeah. I
as-
I must say I hate his new studio.
yeah.
It's awful. It's
And his,
it's such a 90s neon. It's like it's, I don't know, comic book fan, 90s comic book. That's all it's
his
fucking
whole
hell.
studio was amazing. Whenever they would, I wonder if he still has that wooden table because they post a picture sometimes of from the top, and you would see the table. It was like this sick ass wooden table, like all the stuff on it. I mean, I thought that studio looked really good, but even like everyone in the comment section were like, "What the hell is going on with this alien looking?"
It looks like a shitty disco from an alien planet. Not even a good disco.
But
Ugh.
he says that he moved to Texas because of there are more freedoms. So I wonder which freedoms exactly. I think he's probably referring to things he can do on his land and maybe hunting. Because I mean, I think abortion
Yeah, yeah.
is restricted there.
Cheaper,
Yeah, or like taxes. I mean, they're all like kind of personal ones I can think of in that way. But yeah, he decided to move Texas, and he always says that LA and where he lived was just too crowded and all of that.
yeah, I mean, to be honest, if yeah, I like cities generally more, but I can see myself at some point in life, especially when you have family, it makes sense to go somewhere a bit, I think, quieter, perhaps, with more land and all that. But yeah, I hate the new studio. I fucking hate it. It's just this. Yeah, it's. I hate the. It does. I mean, maybe it's a bit more appropriate for when he's doing MMA,
No,
like
not at all. It
especially when like he
had
has
nothing.
an intellect. No, no, I. It's just the feel it gives me. It's just so like I can't believe like now he's gonna have like all like he sometimes he has really good intellectuals there, and it's just.
I mean, maybe 10% of his shows have to do with MMA fighters. Not even.
I know. The feel of the studio feels like more like a MMA based podcast than an intellectual. And it's just awful. I hate it. I don't know.
I wonder if it's going to grow on people, but I doubt it because there's nothing to grow. grow.
It's so bland and
Yeah.
anyways.
I wonder if he'll change it even. I mean, now he has so much money with the deal with Spotify and everything. I mean, he always did. I mean, this guy, a lot of the things that he does, he just turn into gold. I mean, in the MMA world, he's more beloved than you can humanly imagine. And then he's also a relatively successful comedian, and of course, the podcast world and everything. So, I mean, you don't know the way he dictates what he does in the MMA world and like the company. If you knew the power balances, how he's the only person that that can do this. Like for instance, when coronavirus first hit the US, UFC, which is the main MMA organization, and I'll finish with this, they wanted to continue doing their shows immediately and all this, and all of the people working there, they have no power. They're like, yeah, sure, we want to do it and all that. And Joe Rogan said that he's not going to be flying anywhere. That was at the very beginning, and there were no protocols in place by the states about how to continue MMA fights. And he said no. And by the time they resumed their show, he did come back. But by then, a lot of things had changed, and the government had put out plans on how to, how to carry out sports without fans and all that. So all those and changed, and yeah, I really enjoy a lot of his content. But that guest that he had that day is a particular guest who wisely brought that up. Who
Yeah,
wisely?
you should don't. Yeah, bad messenger. The message may have not been that bad, but yes, yes. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Again, guys, like and subscribe, please, and yeah, hopefully we're gonna improve our uh, our programming and our program
Yeah.
every week.
Leave suggestions. Please leave any suggestions. You can either leave them in the comment section, or we also have our email in the description box. So any suggestion, any way that you think we can make this show both more informative and more fun and easier to watch. Maybe, I'm a little bit concerned that some of our answers are too long, including mine. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not the one to talk, but I guess let's hopefully hopefully people will tell us in the comments.
yeah, please do. And as always, yeah, like, subscribe, and share, like Sam said. And we put a bunch of links in the description box below. And then we chop up some of the videos into smaller ones and post them on our YouTube channel as well. So that's it. I hope you all have a great day, a great weekend, and a great week ahead. And we'll see you all next time.
Take care.